Hey everybody, I'm super tired from a long day at work today, but I wanted to read a couple things for you. One of them is chapter 53 of the End Times and the Change of Kingdoms from the book of Methodius, Bishop of Rome, from the book of the Bee by E.A. Wallace Budge, and the Archko volumes. This part of the Archko volumes I'm going to read is Gamaliel's interview with Joseph and Mary and others concerning Jesus. And Gamaliel was Nicodemus's brother, and Nicodemus is the one in the canon that Jesus told how to become born again. But Nicodemus has his own gospel, and so does Gamaliel. Gamaliel did not believe in Jesus at first, but Nicodemus did, and Nicodemus fought against the Pharisees. But Gamaliel was part of the group that at first was sort of on the side that was against Jesus, but then he changed his mind afterward. But back to the book of the Bee. The reason I'm reading this is because of what's happening in the southern border and what's happening with the invasion of the European lands. I want everyone to understand why that's happening. I still to this day, maybe I just haven't heard it, but many people may not have even heard me, so it's quite possible that I just missed it, but I've never heard anybody say this before. Never heard anybody read this book out loud, except for maybe Zen Garcia, which is where I got it from. So, just really should know this stuff right now. But in the seventh millennium, in the seventh and last millennium, which is what we're in right now, since Adam, will the kingdom of the Persians be destroyed. In it will the children of Ishmael go forth from the wilderness of Yathrib, El Medina, and they will all come and be gathered together in Gibeah of Ramah. And there shall the fat ones of the kingdom of the Greeks, who destroyed the kingdoms of the Hebrews and the Persians, be destroyed by Ishmael, the wild ass of the desert, which is Islam. For in wrath shall he be sent against the whole earth, against man and beast and trees, and it shall be a merciless chastisement. It is not because God loves them that he has allowed them to enter into the kingdoms of the Christians, but by reason of the iniquity and sin which is wrought by the Christians, the like of which has never been wrought in any one of the former generations. They are mad with drunkenness and anger and shameless lasciviousness, which is sexual immorality. They have intercourse with one another wickedly, a man and his son committing fornication with one woman, the brother with his brother's wife, male and female with female, contrary to the law of nature and of Scripture, as the blessed Paul has said, male with male did work shame, and likewise also the women did work lewdness, and contrary to nature had intercourse with one another. Therefore they have brought upon themselves the recompense of punishment which is meet for their error, women as well as men, and hence God will deliver them over to the impurity of the barbarians, which is Islam, that their wives may be polluted by the sons of pollution, which is rape, and men may be subjected to the yoke of tribute. Then shall men sell everything that they have and give it to them, but shall not be able to pay the debt of the tribute. Now that tribute they're talking about right there, that's a tax. 2 Christians were just murdered in the Middle East for not being able to afford the tribute, which is $1,500 at the time, and they were shot for it. So this is happening already, until they give also their children to them into slavery. And the tyrant shall exalt himself until he demands tribute and poll tax from the dead that lie in the dust, first oppressing the orphans and defrauding the widows, which Jesus said we are to protect the orphans and the widows. They will have no pity upon the poor, nor will they spare the miserable. They will not relieve the afflicted. They will smite the gray hairs of the aged, despise the wise, and honor fools. They will mock at those who frame laws, and the little shall be esteemed as the great, and the despised as the honorable. Their words shall cut like swords, and there is none who shall be able to change the persuasive force of their words. The path of their chastisement shall be from sea to sea, and from east to west, and from north to south, and to the wilderness of Yathrib. In their latter days there shall be a great tribulation, old men and old women hungering and thirsting and tortured in bonds until they account the dead happy. They will rip up the pregnant woman, which means rape pregnant women, and tear infants away from their mothers' bosoms and sell them like beasts. And those that are of no use to them they will dash against the stones. They will slay the priests and deacons in the sanctuary, and they will lie with their wives in the house of God. They will make clothes for themselves and their wives out of the holy vestments, and they will spread them upon their horses and work impurity upon them in their beds. They will bring their cattle into the churches and altars, and they will tie up their dogs by the shrines of the saints. In those days the spirit of the righteous in them that are well versed in signs will be grieved. The feeble will deny the true faith and the holy cross and the life giving mysteries, and without compulsion many will deny Christ and become rebels and slanderers and boasters, denying the faith. With this chastisement shall the Christians be tried. For at that time the righteous, the humble, the peaceful, and the gentle will not be sought after, but liars and slanderers and accusers and disturbers and the obscene, and those who are destitute of mercy, and those who scoff at their parents and blaspheme the life-giving mysteries. And the true believers shall come into troubles and persecutions until they despair of their lives. Honor shall be taken away from the priests, and the pastors shall become as the people. When the measure of their, i.e., the Ishmaelites, victory is full, tribulation will increase, and chastisement will be doubled upon man and beast, and there will be a great famine, and the dead bodies of men shall lie in the street and squares without anyone to bury them. And just reckoning shall vanish and disappear from the earth. Pause. That part right there that says, and the dead bodies of men shall lie in the streets and squares without anyone to bury them. I had a dream maybe 8 years ago that it was total pitch black darkness everywhere, and that me and my dad and my brother, we couldn't find any work, and all we could find was to bury the dead. And we had them like in the back of a van, and we were just burying people because it's all we could do to make money. Continuing on, and just reckoning shall vanish and disappear from the earth, and men shall sell their brass and their iron and their clothes, and shall give their sons and their daughters willingly to the heathen. A man shall lie down in the evening and rise in the morning, and shall find at his door 2 or 3 exactors and officers to carry off by force, and 2 or 3 women shall throw themselves upon one man and say, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel, only let us take refuge beneath thy skirts. When men are oppressed and beaten and hunger and thirst, and are tormented by that bitter chastisement, while the tyrants shall live luxuriously and enjoy themselves, and eat and drink and boast in the victory they have won, having destroyed nations and peoples, and shall adorn themselves like brides, saying, the Christians have neither a God nor a deliverer. And pause. Do you see right there? And the Christians have neither a God nor a deliverer. Apparently the rapture has not happened at this point, and yet Christians are being tortured and also tried by God to test them to see if they are actually truly Christians or not. I just want people to realize that, and you don't have to believe what I'm saying, just listen. Then all of a sudden there shall be raised up against them pains like those of a woman in childbirth. And the king of the Greeks shall go forth against them in great wrath, and shall rouse himself like a man who has shaken off his wine. He shall go forth against them from the sea of the Cushites, and shall cast the sword and destruction into the wilderness of Yathrib, and into the dwelling place of their fathers. They shall carry off captive their wives and sons and daughters into the service of slavery, and fear of all those around about them shall fall upon them, and they shall all be delivered into the hand of the king of the Greeks, and shall be given over to the sword and to captivity and to slaughter, and their latter subjection shall be 100 times more severe than their former yoke. They shall be in sore tribulation from hunger and thirst and anxiety. They shall be slaves unto those who serve them, and bitter shall their slavery be. Then shall the earth, which has become desolate of its inhabitants, find peace. And the remnant that is left shall return every man to his own land, to the inheritance of his fathers. And men shall increase like locusts upon the earth which was laid waste. Egypt shall be ravaged, Arabia shall be burnt with fire, and the land of Hebron shall be laid waste, and the tongue of the sea shall be at peace. All the wrath and anger of the king of the Greeks shall have full course upon those who have denied Christ, and there shall be great peace upon the earth, the like of which has not been from the creation of the world until its end. For it is the last peace. And there shall be great joy on the earth, and men shall dwell in peace and quiet. Convents and churches shall be restored. Cities shall be built. The priests shall be freed from taxes, and men shall rest from their labor and anxiety of heart. They shall eat and drink, and there shall neither be pain nor care, and they shall marry wives and beget children during that true peace. Then shall the gates of the north be opened, and the nations shall go forth that were imprisoned there by Alexander the Great. Now, next chapter of Gog and Magog, who are imprisoned in the north. So after a worldwide Muslim takeover, like I said, many times, so many times I can barely even comprehend how many times I've said this, and we're living it right now. Then the current 2 pages I'm about to read will happen. This is page 221 from the Book of the Bee. When Alexander was king and had subdued countries and cities and had arrived in the east, he saw the confines of the east, those men who are of the children of Japheth. They were more wicked and unclean than all other dwellers in the world. Filthy peoples of hideous appearance who ate mice and creeping things of the earth and snakes and scorpions. They never buried the bodies of their dead, and they ate as dainties the children which women aborted and the afterbirth. People ignorant of God and unacquainted with the power of reason, but who lived in this world without understanding like ravening beasts. When Alexander saw their wickedness, he called God to his aid. Now, pause. Most Christians be like, I don't even believe that because Alexander the Great was a pagan and he worshipped idols. Correct. But in this instant, it was so disgusting that he prayed to the one true God. He gathered together and brought them and their wives and children and made them go in and shut them within the confines of the north. This is the gate of the world on the north, and there is no other entrance or exit from the confines of the world, the inner earth, it's saying, from the east to the north. And Alexander prayed to God with tears, and God heard his prayer and commanded those two lofty mountains, which are called the children of the north, and they drew nigh to one another until there remained between them about 12 cubits. And a cubit is 22 inches basically, so 22 times 12 inches long, wide. Then he built in front of them a strong building. And he made for a door of brass and anointed it within and without with oil of thanactus, so that if they should bring iron implements near it to force it open, they wouldn't be able to move it. And if they wished to melt it with fire, it would quench it. And if it feared neither the operations of devils nor of sorcerers, and was not to be overcome by them. Now there are 22 kingdoms imprisoned within the northern gate, and their names are these: Gog, Magog, Nawal, Eshkenaz, Denether, Pacte, Welote, Himne, Parze, Dakle, Thubalye, Demarche, Kabekwaye, and the next one is called the Dogmen, which is called Cynocephali, and the Dogmen is what Saint Christopher was, who was of the dog-headed race, and they have like armor in museums that's in the shape of a dog's head, and they belong to the dog-headed race. It's like a factual thing. You can look it up in history. They had tusks that came out of their mouth like this, and Saint Christopher prayed to God that he could preach against all the idol worshipping in his region, and so God let him talk like a human, and he was murdered because him and like 10,000 other people were murdered because they wouldn't worship idols in this one city. Emderatha, Garmido, cannibals, Thurkiye, Enle, and a bunch of other ones. At the end of the world and at the final consummation, when men are eating and drinking and marrying wives and women are given to husbands. See, this part, and marrying wives and women are given to husbands. A lot of people think that's now because people are still getting married and stuff like that. We're not at the end of the world. Remember it says in the Bible, wars and rumors of wars, but the end is not yet. This is what it's talking about. Everybody thinks this is like the end right now. It's not even close to it. We're right at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. People think, oh, it's so bad now. No, it's not even close. Not even close to as bad as it's going to get. And they are planting vineyards and building buildings, and there is neither wicked man nor adversary on account of the assured tranquility and certain peace. Suddenly the gates of the north shall be open, and the host of the nations that are imprisoned there shall go forth. The whole earth shall tremble before them, and men shall flee and take refuge in the mountains, and in caves, and in burial places, and in the clefts of the earth, and they shall die of hunger, and there will be none to bury them, by the reason of the multitude of afflictions which they will make them suffer. They will eat the flesh of men and drink the blood of animals. They will devour the creeping things of the earth, hunt for serpents and scorpions and reptiles that shoot out venom and eat them. They will eat dead dogs and cats, and the abortions of women and the afterbirth, and they will give mothers the bodies of their children to cook, and they will eat them before them without shame. They will destroy the earth, and there will be none to stand before them. After 1 week of that sore affliction, they will all be destroyed in the plain of Joppa. For thither will all those people be gathered together with their wives and their sons and daughters, and by the command of God, one of the hosts of the angels will descend and will destroy them in 1 moment. And remember it says in the Bible, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. The next chapter is of the coming of the Antichrist and the son of perdition. In a week and a half of weeks, after the destruction of these wretches, shall the son of destruction appear. He shall be conceived in Chorazin, born in Bethsaida, and reared in Capernaum. I'm not going to read the rest of this right now, but I'll read it on the next show. But I want you to know that it says he's from the tribe of Dan, and people will think he's the Christ, but he's not, and all the oceans dry up, and it's not going to be a fun time. So the Antichrist appears after the giants are released from the north. That's what it says. And when I used to have prophetic dreams all the time, this dude, I used to listen to everybody's prophetic dream just to hear like if they had the same ones as me. And I told you, I started having them when the room I'm in burnt down. The room I'm sitting in burnt down middle of the night in January. Now it's February right now, so it was like pretty close, like weather and stuff like that. We're building a fireplace was right there, and the whole house burnt down. Right after that, I dreamed Obama was the Antichrist. So I was searching the internet, and I was looking for all these other dreams, and I'm like, dude, this is so weird. Like, I never had these kind of dreams before. Like, I wonder why this is happening and stuff like that. And I honestly couldn't tell you why, except that for some reason, right before like the dream thing happened, Jesus showed me that there was other books of the Bible, like the Acts of Thomas was the first one I found where he was where Thomas goes to India and he preaches to India. I didn't even know that book existed, and I went to Christian school my whole life, and they never even mentioned these other books. And then Enoch's book says that, like, his book wasn't meant for that generation, but a remote one that's going to be living in the end times when all the wicked and ungodly are going to be removed from the earth. So apparently these books were meant to be held back for our generation. Then on top of that, the reason that the Acts of Thomas was shown to me is I was having a really bad time financially. I was paying child support, and I was like couldn't afford to live and pay my own rent and stuff up here in New Hampshire because the economy was bad. So we were gonna move to Texas, but before we did, I was asking God, what should I do? And I never really prayed to God like this before. So at lunchtime, I would go out in the parking lot and I would walk around the building, and I knew about Jericho, like from the Bible. So I walked around my building 7 times every day, 7 times, 7 times, and like a lot of weird stuff happened during this time because like some ladies' dogs, they would like bark at me viciously, like so bad. I never seen dogs bark at me like this, and they were like gonna attack me almost. But she had them on a leash, like it was like she was just walking them normal, but they were like wanted to kill me or something. And they were like nice dogs. They weren't like vicious looking dogs. They just wanted to kill me. I don't know if they were like possessed or something, whatever. But all these weird things would happen to me when I was just going for this walk. So I kept doing it though. 7 times I'll walk around the building and then come back in. And even people commented inside and they're like, Jared, you look like you're like walking like something crazy is gonna happen to you or something. Like, why are you walking so like ferociously around the building? I'm like, I'm just trying to get my exercise. I'm just listening to like something on tape. Like, I'm not going nuts or anything. And I was listening to Isaiah on audiobook in my headphones. And then one day I came in from doing that, and behind me on the wall was this gigantic poster, like full color poster, and it was of it's like it's like this movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's like a comedy by Mel Brooks, I think, and it's got in the thing they're looking up at God, mocking it, but like it's that picture where the king has a sun emblem on his chest and he's looking up at the sky and God's there or whatever. And I barely know about it, but I knew that picture, like it was like a popular picture, like on like memes or whatever. Not that those things were back then, but like it was like stuff like that. I could recognize it enough. So I was like, that's kind of weird. It was right behind my cubicle. So it's like a picture of a king looking up at God with a sun emblem. And I go to sit down at my desk after listening to Isaiah, and I find the Acts of Thomas. And then ever since that day, after being homeless in Texas, my car breaking down, going through a million different trials and tribulations and different things, similar to what happens in the Bible to like patriarchs and stuff. Like, me and my wife made it through it all. And ever since then is when I found all these other books, like from scriptural-truth.com, Apocrypha 1970, Robert Farrell, The Super Gospel, Zen Garcia's work, Zen Garcia's bookstore, Sacred Word Publishing, like everything I've ever found, all the books. And I wanted to say that too. If you're new to listening to what I'm talking about, if you want any of these books, I can email you a PDF of all the books you could possibly want for free. And these ones I'm talking about are like from libraries that were photocopied, and it's like on a CD that one of my listeners gave me. Jody, thank you. So if you want any of these books, like the extra biblical, like pseudepigrapha, apocryphal books, like that type of stuff, let me know. It's not like the actual books I'm reading, but like the Acts of Thomas, the other Acts, the other apocalypses, things like that. I have most of them free. I can send to you. All right, so let's get into the next one. So, like I said, Gamaliel, well, reading this, the Archko volumes, and if you don't know what this is basically around like the 1800s. This guy was broke down in his car, and he was a German like guy that used to like for 5 years be working at the Vatican Library, and he found this thing called the archaeological writings of the Sanhedrin, basically, and all these are different accounts of what people wrote down about what they experienced when they interviewed either Jesus, Mary, or Joseph. So some of it's Caiaphas and Annas, the people who crucified Christ. Some of it's Gamaliel. Gamaliel is Nicodemus's brother, and Nicodemus buried Jesus and like properly buried him and stuff. And if you want to know more about him, you can find out. They took his gospel out in the 1500s, but it's a powerful book. So this is how this begins. I'm just going to explain this real quick. All right, listen to this. The Hagiographa, or holy writings, found in the St. Sophia Mosque in Constantinople. So I told you that a lot of the Muslims saved Christian writings when they took over their lands and put them in their libraries. I don't know if it was like to say, haha, we have your stuff, or it was like actual good people just wanted to save it, because some people say Jesus was a prophet, so maybe they were saving it to like keep his stuff as like a prophet level stuff. But Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, so I'm not saying he's a prophet, he's God. Okay, but they did save his stuff. You can even see it in like movies and stuff like that, like the Kingdom of Heaven. When he took over the land of Israel, he like set the cross back up like out of respect. You know what I mean? So just stuff like that. But you might not notice this. Most people might notice this. I only found this out a year ago, and I studied this stuff a lot. But where it says the Hagiographa, or holy writings, the Hagiographa is what the Apocrypha was originally called. So Apocrypha means hidden. So it says the hidden or holy writings. That's what it says right when you start this. Anyways, it says that the Hagiographa, or holy writings, found in the Saint Sophia Mosque at Constantinople, made by Gamaliel in the Talmuds of the Jews. And most people like hear the word Talmuds and they're like, "Oh, I'm not reading that." No, you should read it. Read it and then decide for yourself if it's something you should like continue studying or not. Of the Jews in 27 BC, I think. It seems Gamaliel was sent by the Sanhedrin to interrogate Joseph and Mary in regard to the child Jesus. It says, quote, I found Joseph and Mary in the city of Mecca, in the land of Ammon or Moab, but I did not find Jesus. When I went to the place where I was told he was somewhere else, and thus I followed him from place to place until I despaired of finding him at all. Whether he knew that I was in search of him and did it to elude me, I cannot tell, though I think it most likely the former was the reason, for his mother says he is bashful and shuns company. Joseph is a woodworkman. He is very tall and ugly. His hair looks as though it might have been dark auburn when young. His eyes are gray and vicious. He is anything but prepossessing in his appearance, and he is as gross and glum as he looks. He is but a poor talker, and it seems that yes and no are the depth of his mind. I am satisfied he is very disagreeable to his family. His children look very much like him, and upon the whole I should call them a third-rate family. I asked him who his parents were. He said his father's name was Jacob and his father was Matthew. He did not like to talk about the subject. He is very jealous. I told him that we had heard that he had had a vision, and I was sent to ascertain the facts in the case. He said he did not call it a vision, he called it a dream. He said after he and Mary had agreed to marry, it seemed that something told him that Mary was with child, that he did not know whether he was asleep or awake, but it made such an impression on his mind that he concluded to have nothing more to do with her. And while he was working one day under a shed, all at once a man in snowy white stood by his side and told him not to doubt the virtue of Mary, for she was holy before the Lord, that the child conceived in her was not by a man but by the Holy Ghost, and that the child would be free from human passions. In order to do this, he must, that is, his humanity must be of the extract of Alma, that is, Hebrew word for virgin, that he might endure all things and not resist. And you see right there, all that was just said. Why would that be? It's because the original sin is sex. The original sin is that Eve was seduced by Satan, and her name means adulteress. Hava means adulteress. So that's why he was a virgin. That's why he was baptized in the Jordan, because that's where Adam was praying when she was seduced. That he might endure all things and not resist, and fill the demands of prophecy. He said the angel told him that this child should be great and should rule all kingdoms of the world. He said that this child should set up a new kingdom wherein should dwell righteousness and peace, and that the kingdoms of this world which should oppose him, God would utterly destroy. I asked him, how could a virgin conceive of herself without the germination of a male? He said, this is the work of God. He has brought to life the womb of Elizabeth, so she had conceived and will bear a son in her old age, who will go before and tell the people of the coming king. After telling me all these things, he disappeared like the melting down of a light. I then went and told Mary what had occurred, and she told me that the same angel or one like him had appeared to her and told her the same things. So I married Mary, thinking that if what the angel had told us was true, it would be greatly to our advantage, but I am fearful we are mistaken. Jesus seems to take no interest in us or anything else much. I call him lazy and careless. I do not think he will ever amount to much less a king. If he does, he must do a great deal better than he's been doing. I asked him how long after the interview with the angel before the child was born. He said, I don't know, about 7 or 8 months. I asked him where they were at the time. He said Bethlehem. The Roman commander had given orders for all the Jews to go on a certain day to be enrolled as taxpayers, and he and Mary went to Bethlehem as the nearest place of enrollment, and while there this babe was born. I asked if anything strange occurred there that night. He said that the people were much excited, but he was too tired, and he had gone to sleep and said nothing, and saw nothing. He said toward day there were several priests came in to see them and the babe, and gave them many presents, and the news got circulated that this child was to be king of the Jews, and it created such an excitement that he took the child and his mother and came to Moab for protection, for fear the Romans would kill the child to keep from being a rival to the Romans. I discovered that all Joseph's ideas were of a selfish kind. Pause. In the Super Gospel, when Joseph is dying on his deathbed, he admits to everything that is being said right now. He said, I wish I didn't think in my mind. He's telling Jesus this, and he says, I wish I didn't say in my mind that I want to get rid of your mother. And he says, please forgive me. I was selfish in all the things I was thinking. And just everything that's being said right now is what he says. All he thought of was himself. Mary is altogether a different character, and she is too noble to be the wife of such a man. She seems to be about 40 or 45 years of age, abounds with a cheerful and happy spirit, and is full of happy fancies. That's true, too. When she was in the temple as a child, she was perfect at singing, perfect at sewing. She was always happy. Angels used to feed her. There's a lot of stuff that they don't tell you. She is fair to see, rather fleshy, has soft and innocent-looking eyes, and seems to be naturally a good woman. I asked her who her parents were. She said her father's name was Eli and her mother's name was Anna. Her grandmother's name was Phanuel, a widow of the tribe of Asher, of great renown. I asked her if Jesus was the son of Joseph. She said he was not. I asked her to relate the circumstances of the child's history. She said that one day, while she was grinding some meal, there appeared at the door a stranger of shining raiment, which means clothing, which showed as bright as the light. She was very much alarmed at his presence and trembled like a leaf, but all her fears were calmed when he spoke to her. And he said, Mary, thou art loved by the Lord, and he has sent me to tell thee that thou shalt have a child, that this child shall be great and rule all nations of the earth. She continued, I immediately thought of my engagement to Joseph, and supposed that was the way the child was to come, but he astonished me the more when he told me that my cousin Elizabeth had conceived and would bear a son, whose name was to be John, and my son should be called Jesus. This caused me to remember that Zacharias had a vision and disputed with the angel, for that he was struck with dumbness, so that he could no longer hold the priest's office. I asked the messenger if Joseph knew anything of the matter. He said that he told Joseph that I was to have a child by command of the Holy Ghost, and that he was to redeem his people from their sins, and was to reign over the whole world, that every man would confess to him, and he should rule over all the kings of the earth. I asked her how she knew that he was an angel, and she said he told her so. And then she knew he was an angel from the way he came and went. I asked her to describe how he went away from her, and she said that he seemed to melt away like the extinguishing of a light. I asked her if she knew anything of John the Baptist. She said he lived in the mountains of Judea, the last she knew of him. I asked her if he and Jesus were acquainted, or did they visit. She said she did not think they knew each other. Pause. Mary knows that John the Baptist lives up in the woods because when Zacharias was murdered in the temple, the mother kissed him, and Elizabeth kissed him and knew he was gonna, like, never, she was never gonna see him again. So she took John the Baptist when he was just like a little toddler, and she ran away with nothing, no backpack, nothing, no food, nothing. She had so much faith that God opened up the side of a mountain for her to escape, and it just disappeared basically in front of her, like the like a hole, and her and John the Baptist just went through it, and she escaped that way. So when the soldiers came, Zacharias didn't have to really lie. He said, "I don't know where they went," because he didn't, because they went through a mountain. So then Elizabeth died in the wilderness, and John was alone as like 7 or 8 years old or something, and Jesus was in like Egypt or somewhere like away from. He might have been back in like their lands by then. I forget, but he like was sitting and he started crying, and he knew that Elizabeth had died because he said to Mary, "Your kinswoman has just died, and John is alone." So Jesus took a cloud from heaven. It came down, picked him and Mary up, went to where they were. They buried Elizabeth, and John the Baptist stayed in the wilderness. And Mary's like, "No, we have to take him." And Jesus is like, "No, he needs to stay here to prepare a way for me." And that's what John the Baptist said when he came later on in life, is I was preparing a way in the wilderness for the Lord. And that was a metaphor for what would happen in the future, because Elijah is John the Baptist in the future with Enoch. And they have to prepare a way for Jesus and his coming the second time. See, it's like a future metaphor, and it goes back and forth in time. And nobody really knows that. And even more people would dispute it, but they can say whatever they want. I don't care. I asked her if at the time this angel, as she called him, visited her, she was a virgin. She said she was, and that she had never showed to a man, nor was known by any man. I asked her if she had still she's saying, "I have never known a man." Mary was a virgin until she died. Joseph was a widow person, and he had 4 children already, or 4 sons or something like that at least. But he had like way more kids than they tell you already, and she never had any kids. Those kids that she had were not his. I mean, were not hers. They were Joseph's from a previous marriage. So when you see them, like everybody setting up a manger scene and stuff, and Joseph and Mary are like holding each other like they're romantic lovers, it's BS, because she had to be a virgin, and she stayed a virgin her whole life. And that's not some Catholic BS either. That's a real. So people can say whatever they want. She said she was, and that she had never showed to man or known by a man. I asked her if she at the time maintained her for Chet, and after making her and Joseph understand what I meant, they both said she had. And Joseph said this was the way he had of testing her virtue. I asked her if she knew when conception took place. She said she did not. I asked her if she was in any pain in bearing or delivering the child. She said none of any consequence. I asked her if he was healthy, to give me a description of his life. She said he was perfectly healthy, that she never heard him complain of any pain or dissatisfaction. His food always agreed with him, that he would eat anything set before him, and if anyone else complained, he would often say he thought it good enough, much better than we deserved. She said she said that Joseph was a little hard to please, but his boy had answered him so often, and his answers were so mild and yet so suitable, that he had almost broken him of finding fault. She said he settled all the disputes of the family, that no odds what was the subject or who it was, one word from him closed all mouths, and what gave him such power was his words were always unpretending, and spoken as though they were not intended as a rebuke, but merely as a decision. She's talking about Jesus. That's funny. I don't think I read this part before. I asked her if she had ever seen him angry or out of humor. She said she had seen him apparently vexed and grieved at the disputes and follies of others, but had never seen him angry. I asked her if he had any worldly aspirations after money or wealth or great or a great name? Or did he delight in fine dress, like the most of youth? She said that was one thing that vexed her. He seemed to take no care of his person. He did not care whether he was dressed or not, or whether the family got along well or ill. It was all alike to him. She said she talked to him about it, and he would look at her a little grieved and say, "Woman, for such he always called me. You do not know who I am." Indeed, she said, he takes so little interest in the things of the world and the great questions of the day. They were beginning to despair of his ever amounting to much less a king, as the angel said he would be. If so, he would have to act very differently from what he was acting at the time. I told her that the Jewish doctors contended that the amorous disposition is particular to the male. I asked her if she had ever seen in his private life of Jesus any signs of such disposition. She said she had not. I asked if she saw him in any particular fondness for female society. She said she had not, if anything rather the contrary, that the young Bethal, the word in Hebrew for young women, were all very fond of him, and were always seeking his society, and yet he seemed to care nothing for them, and if they appeared too fond of him, he treated them almost with scorn. He well often gave up and left them, and wandered away and spent time in meditation and prayer. He is a perfect ascetic in his life. When I see how the people like to be with him, and ask him questions, and seem to take such delight with his answers, both men and women, it almost vexes me. They say there is a young woman in Bethany whom he intends to marry, but unless he changes his course very much, he will never be qualified to have a family. But I do not believe the report. He never seems to me to care anything about women when he is in my presence. Thus it seems that Joseph and Mary both have lost all confidence in his becoming anything. They seem to think that the Sanhedrin should do something for him to get him out and let him show himself to the people. I tried to console them by telling them that my understanding of the prophecy was that he had to come to the high priesthood first, and there work in the spiritual dominion of the heart. And when he had brought about a unity of heart and oneness of aim, it would be easy enough to establish his political claim, and all who would not willingly submit to him. It would be an easy matter with the sword of Joshua or Gideon to bring under his control. It seemed to me that his parents' ideas are of a selfish character, and that they care nothing about the Jewish government nor the Roman oppression. All they think of is self-exaltation and to be personally benefited by their son's greatness. But I told them they were mistaken, that the building up of the kingdom of heaven was not to be done by might nor by power, but the Spirit of the Lord. It would not do for us to use carnal weapons, nor to exact carnal pleasures to be derived therefrom. That it was not my understanding of the prophecy that the king was to use such weapons, either for himself or for the benefit of the party, but for the good of all men. That his dominion was to be universal, and it was to be a spiritual character, and that he was sent to the lost and not to be found. Or not to the found, sorry. His parents told me of an old man who lived on the road to Bethany, who had once been a priest, a man of great learning, and well skilled in the law and prophets, and that Jesus was often there with him reading the law and prophets together, that his name was Gamaliel, and that I might find Jesus there, but he was not there. Gamaliel said he was often at Bethany with a young family, and he thought there was love affair between him and one of the girls. I asked him if he had seen anything like a courtship between them. He said he had not, but inferred from their intimacy and from the fondness on the women's part, as well as from the laws of nature, that such would be the case. I asked him to give me an outline of the character of Jesus. He said that he was a young man of the finest thought and feeling he ever saw in his life, and that he was the most apt in his answers and solutions of difficult problems of any man of his age he had ever seen, and that his answers seemed to give more universal satisfaction, so much so that the old philosopher would not dispute with him, or in any manner join issue with him, or ask the second time. I asked Gamaliel, who taught him to read and interpret the law and the prophets. He said that his mother said that he had always known how to read the law, that his mind seemed to master it from the beginning. This is in the Super Gospel. He could school people at 5 years old. And into the laws of nature and relation of man to his fellow. In his teachings or talks, he gave a deeper insight, inspiring mutual love and strengthening the common trust of society. Another plan he has of setting men right with the laws of nature. He turns nature into a great law book of illustrations. See that? He turns nature into a great law book of illustrations. That's the metaphor that's in the Bible, where you find out the pigs are false Christians, the dogs are false Jews. This is all written into the Bible on purpose. This is what he did. Showing that every bush is a flame, every rock a fountain of water, every star a pillar of fire, and every cloud the one that leads to God. That's why he calls 10,000 he says like a cloud of witnesses, and then he says 10,000s of his saints will come at the end of time. So it's like it calls them clouds, though. Like it's all metaphor. So like the saints are clouds. So if you see clouds, you see saints. If you see waves, then it's like doctrines. If you see like the sea, it's the age. If you see like north, he's talking about heaven. If you see south, he's talking about hell. If you see the east, he's talking about the future. If you see west, he's talking about the past. If you see like trying to think of other keys that are in the Bible. Anyways, those are like the keys. You can see the keys at Robert Farrell's website, but that's what Jesus does. He talks in keys in the Bible. Hold on one second. Oh, I was going to say rocks. Because when he says stones in the Bible, he's talking about stones, the Testament, the two Testaments. Whenever he says, if these children didn't speak, the stones would like come alive and speak. He's talking about the canon. So he's talking about this two stones. One second. Another plan he has of setting men right with the laws of nature. He turns nature into a great book of illustrations, showing that every bush is a flame, every rock a fountain of water, every star a pillar of fire, every cloud the one that leads to God. He makes all nature preach the doctrine of trust in the divine fatherhood. He speaks of the lilies as pledges of God's care and points to the fowls as evidence of his watchfulness over human affairs. Who can measure the distance between God and the flower of the field? What connection is there between man and the lily? By such illustrations, he creates a solicitude in man that seems to awe him into reverence, and he becomes attracted towards heavenly thought and feels that he is in the presence of one that is superior. In this talk, he brings one to feel he is very near the presence of God. He says, how much more your Father? The plane is one, though the intermediate points are immeasurably distant. Thus, by beginning with a flower, he reasons upward to the absolute, and then descends and teaches lessons of trust in a loving Father. The lessons of trust in God reassure the anxious listeners and create an appetite that makes him long for more. And it often seems when he has brought his hearers to the highest point of anxiety, he suddenly breaks off and leaves his company as though he cared nothing for them. Jesus in his talk brings all these illustrations to make men feel his nearness to his kindred man, teaching also that their relation to and dependence upon God, and although his method is happy, it does not seem to me that it is the most successful. He teaches that man and the flowers and birds drink from the same fountain and are fed from the same table, yet at the same time he seems to do everything to excite suspicion and prejudice. We that are watching him to see his divine mission commence, he is continually tantalizing our expectations as well as mocking our natural reason and desires. When a man separates himself from all other men, both in point of doctrine as well as discipline, he takes a very great risk on his part, especially when he confines God to one channel, and that one of his own dictation. A man that assumes these responsible positions must have vast resources from which to draw, or he will sink in a whirlpool which his own impertinence has created. Through Jesus, in his teachings or talks, his words sound so much like the teachings of Hillel or Shammai that I must call it a teaching, though he has no special scholars. We learn that God is Spirit and God is Father, and he says these are the only two things that are essential for man to know. Then he illustrates this to the parents and asks them what would they do for their children. He was telling some mothers a circumstance of mothers starving herself to feed her child, and then applied it to God as our Father, and then commenced shouting. They were so happy, and Jesus got up and left the house in seeming disgust. Maslin says he is tempted at times to become impatient with Jesus as he devotes so much time to details. It seems almost a waste of time for a man who came to save the world to be lingering over a special case of disease. He thinks he could hasten Jesus' physical deportment. Why not speak one word and remove every sick patient from his sickbed at the same hour? What a triumph that would be. I asked him if Jesus had healed anyone. He said not as yet, but if he is the King of the Jews, he was able to heal all nations, and why would he do it? why would he not do it at once? If he would, there would be nothing more required to establish his kingship. But I said to him, it is not equally so with God's creative power. See what time and labor it takes to bring forth a grain of corn. Why not have caused the earth to bring forth every month instead of every year? Christ was talking in defense of his Father. The people must learn to love and obey the Father before they would reverence his Son. Yes, he said that God Jesus represented was one that the people might love and venerate, that he was a God of love and had no bloody designs to execute on even a bad man, provided he ceased his evil ways. It is to be noted that in all Jesus' talk, there are manifest references to the future. Many of his statements were like a sealed letter, not to be opened but by time. A grain of mustard was to result in a large tree. All his ideas refer to the future, like the parent helping the child with his burden of today by telling of the blessings of tomorrow, and by making day to day the seed corn of tomorrow, keeping the action of today under moral control. By making the morrow the day of judgment, he stated further that Jesus was a young man who was the best judge of human nature he had ever seen. That he thought at times he could tell men their thoughts and expose their bad principles, and while he had all these advantages of life, he seemed not to care for them, nor to use them abusively. He seemed to like all men, one as well as another, so much so that his own parents have become disgusted with him and have almost cast him off. But Jesus has this particular temperament that he seems not to care, and is as well satisfied with one as another. He said that Jesus seemed fond of Mary and Martha, who lived at Bethany, and probably I might find him there. Quotation marks. Gamaliel is a man of very deep thought and most profound judgment. All his life he has made the scriptures his study. He too is a good judge of human nature, and he is satisfied that Jesus is the Christ. He said that Jesus seemed to understand the prophecy by intuition. I asked him where Jesus was taught to read the prophecy. He said that his mother told him that Jesus could read from the beginning, and that no one ever taught him how to read. He said that he, in making quotations from the prophets, was sometimes mistaken or his memory failed him, but Jesus could correct him every time without the scroll, and that sometimes he thought Jesus was certainly mistaken, but never in a single instance was he wrong. I asked him to describe his person to me so that I might know him if I should meet him. He said, if you ever meet him, you will know him. While he is nothing but a man, there is something about him that distinguishes him from every other man. He is the picture of his mother, only he has not her smooth round face. His hair is a little more golden than hers, though it is much more sunburned as anything else. He is tall, and his shoulders are a little drooped. His visage is thin, and of a swarthy complexion, though this is from exposure. His eyes are large, and a soft blue, and rather dull and heavy. The lashes are long, and his eyebrows are very large. His nose is that of a Jew. In fact, he reminds me of an old-fashioned Jew in every sense of the word. He is not a great talker unless there is something brought up about heaven and divine things. When his tongue moves glibly and his eyes light up with a particular brilliancy. Though there is this peculiarity about Jesus, he never argues a question, he never disputes. He will commence and state facts, and they're on such a solid basis that nobody will have the boldness to dispute with him. Though he has such mastership of judgment, he takes no pride in confuting his opponents, but always seems to be sorry for them. I have seen him attacked by the scribes and doctors of the law, and they seemed like little children learning their lessons under a master. His strongest points are in the spiritual power of the law and the intentions of the prophets. The young people tried to get him to take a class with them and teach them, but he utterly refused. This Jew is convinced that he is the Messiah of the world. I went from there to Bethany, but Jesus was not there. They said that he and Lazarus were away, and they could not tell where. I went and saw Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, and I had a long talk with them. They are very pleasant and nice young maids, and Mary is quite handsome. I teased her about Jesus, but they both denied that Jesus was anything like a lover. He was only a friend. Though this is common for young maids, I did not know whether to believe them or not until I told them my real business. And when I told them that this was the same person that was born in the Virgin Bethlehem some 26 years before, and that his mother had told me all the facts in the case. They seemed deeply interested. They then told me upon their honor that Jesus never talked or hinted to either one of them about the subject of marriage. Martha blushed and said she wished he had. If he was to be king, she would like to be the queen. I asked them if they had ever seen him in the company of young virgins, and they said they had not. I asked them if they had heard him talk about young girls, or if he had sought their society more than that of men. They had both declared they had not, and that they were very much surprised that he did not. I asked them what he talked of when they were in their company. They said he was not much in their company, that he and their brother would go up on the housetop and stay there half the night and sometimes all night, talking and arguing points of interest to them both. Mary said she had often gone near so she could listen to them, for she loved to hear him talk, and he was so mild and unpretending, and then was so intelligent that he vast differently from any other of the young men she had ever seen. And I asked them what was their brother's opinion of him. They said he thought there never was such a man on earth. He thought him to be one of God's prophets. He said when they were out in the mountains, as there are most all of the time, Jesus can tell him all about the flowers, trees, and rocks, can tell him everything in the world, and that none of the wild animals are afraid of him. He says that often the stag and the wolf will come and stand for Jesus to stroke their mane and seem almost loath to go away from him. He says that no poisonous serpent will offer to hiss at them, and their brother thinks he is perfectly safe if Jesus is with him. I asked them if he had ever told their brother anything about himself. They said that if he had spoken to their brother, he had not told them. Now the masters of Israel, after having investigated this matter, after tracing Jesus from his conception to the present time, after obtaining all the information that is to be had on the important subject, getting it from those who are more likely to tell the truth from the fact that they are disinterested persons, and then taking a prophetical as well as historical view of the subject, I have come to the conclusion that this is the Christ that we are looking for. And as a reason for my conclusion, I will call to your attention the following facts. First, the prophecy of Isaiah, section 7. He says, "Hear now, saith the Lord, O house of David, is it a small thing for you? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name God with men. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land of God abhorrous shall be forsaken of her king." Section 8. Bind the testimony seal of the law among his disciples. The Lord will hide his face from the house of Jacob, and he will look for him. Here is a literal fulfillment of this word of the Most High God, so clear and plain that none may mistake. Jeremiah 31st section. "Turn, O virgin, to thy people, for the hand of the Lord is upon thee. For the Lord shall create a new thing in the earth, a woman shall compass a man." Here again are set forth the same things that Isaiah speaks of, and the same thing that I have learned from Mary. Micah section 5. "Thou Bethlehem Ephratah, thou art little among the thousands of Judah. Out of thee shall come forth unto me him that shall rule my people. He is from everlasting, and I will give them up until the time she travaileth to bring forth my firstborn, that he may rule all people." Here we have the city, the virgin, the office, his manner of life, the seeking him by the Sanhedrin. All these things are under our eyes as full and complete as I now write them, who have all this testimony given in this letter. How can we as people dispute these things? In the 49th section of Genesis, making reference to the history that is now upon us, the writer says, "A captive shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawmaker from him unto Shiloh come, and gather his people between his feet, and keep them forever." So, hope you guys enjoyed that. Pretty long chapter, but we finished it. God bless and have a great night.